My name is Helena Ward, and I'm 38 years old. If you asked anyone today who I am, they'd probably describe me as a tech entrepreneur, a woman who built something out of nothing, someone relentless. But the truth is, my story didn't start with power or success or confidence. It started in a dim, over-air-conditioned college computer lab with a girl who barely knew how to look people in the eye. Back then, I wasn't exactly the social type. I lived between my dorm room, the library, and the computer lab. Coding was my escape, a place where the rules made sense and people didn't. I spent nights teaching myself everything I could: algorithms, app structures, database, design, just waiting for the day I'd build something real, something that mattered. I didn't have a big circle of friends, just a few people who tolerated my quietness and my tendency to dive headfirst into problems most people wouldn't touch. But among those few, one person stood out more than anyone: Lena Brooks. Lena had been my best friend since high school. If I was the girl who blended into the corners of every room, Lena was the one people gravitated toward. Sharp-witted, charming, effortlessly confident, she could talk her way into or out of anything. We were opposites in every way that mattered, but we fit. She brought me out of my shell, and I grounded her when her impulsiveness got ahead of her. I always thought we'd be in each other's lives forever. Then came Evan Cole. I met Evan during my sophomore year in an econ class I was barely passing. He was the guy who always had neatly organized notes, knew exactly when assignments were due, and somehow made even microeconomics look easy. I noticed him long before we ever spoke: quiet smile, sleeves rolled up neatly, glasses slipping down the bridge of his nose as he worked. But I didn't dare speak to him. Guys like him didn't usually notice girls like me. That changed in the library one evening. I was frantically flipping through my notebook, desperately trying to cram for an exam I knew I wasn't ready for. Evan walked over, sat down across from me without a word, and gently pushed my notebook aside. "You're using the wrong syllabus," he said matter-of-factly. Then he handed me his notes, color-coded, perfectly organized, and undeniably better than anything I'd managed on my own. "You owe me coffee," he added, with a tiny smirk that made my heart feel like it skipped a beat. That was the beginning. We started studying together, and pretty soon studying turned into talking about everything. Ambitions. The kind of life we wanted, the things that scared us, the things that drove us. Evan believed in me in a way I didn't even believe in myself. He made the idea of a future feel possible. And Lena welcomed him instantly. She teased me about him, nudged me every time he smiled my way, and declared, "If you don't date him, I will." She laughed when she said it. I thought nothing of it. By senior year, Evan and I were inseparable. A year after graduation, we got married in a small ceremony where Lena stood at my side as my maid of honor. Evan gave a speech about loyalty dreams and building a life together. Lena gave a toast that made everyone cry and laugh at the same time. For a while, it truly felt like I had everything. A husband who believed in my potential, a best friend who'd always had my back, and a future I could almost touch. But real life after college wasn't glamorous. I worked long hours at a small tech company, mostly coding, debugging, and silently carrying 1,000 tiny hopes inside me. Lena landed a position in marketing, but hated every second of corporate repetitiveness. Evan took a finance job, but confessed to me more than once that it didn't feel like his calling. The shift came a couple of years later. Lena and I had always dreamed about starting something together. And eventually we did. We quit our jobs, pooled our small savings, and started building a tiny app development company from scratch. The idea wasn't earth-shattering apps to simplify everyday tasks like ordering food or booking appointments, but it was ours. Lena handled business development, pitching clients, closing deals, doing the talking I wasn't good at. I handled coding and product structure. We worked out of Lena's cramped garage using secondhand equipment and a folding table that wobbled every time someone breathed too hard. Evan saw us burning ourselves out, and eventually he left his corporate job to join us as our operations manager. He was organized, smart with numbers, and steady, something Lena and I desperately needed. The three of us, we worked like a well-oiled machine. Late-night brainstorming sessions, cheap takeout eaten over laptops, celebrating tiny victories like landing our first paying client. The air in that garage always felt charged, messy, cramped, hot as hell in the summer, but it was filled with hope. Then we got our first big break. One of our apps caught the attention of a small group of investors. Their funding let us move into an actual office. It wasn't glamorous, flickering lights, peeling paint, AC that rattled like a dying engine, but to us, it felt like winning the lottery. We worked like maniacs, but we were happy. For a while, it felt like nothing could touch us. But success has a funny way of exposing cracks you didn't want to see. First, it was small things, Evan and Lena texting more often, laughing about things I wasn't part of, exchanging glances I couldn't quite interpret. Then it became late-night work sessions without me, vague explanations and carefully worded excuses. I told myself it was just stress, that they were working hard, that I trusted both of them. But deep down, something inside me, something small but sharp, whispered that this wasn't normal. I tried to ignore it, but the whisper was growing. The thing about doubt is that it doesn't arrive like a storm. It creeps in quietly, almost politely, slipping between the cracks of your happiest moments until suddenly it's everywhere, coloring everything you thought you understood. For weeks, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Evan and Lena had always gotten along. They were both extroverted, good with people, smoother with clients than I ever could be. It made sense that they'd communicate constantly, especially as the company grew more demanding. But things changed. The late-night texts became more frequent. They'd be on opposite sides of the room, each smiling at something on their phones. When I'd ask what was funny, they'd answer casually, almost dismissively. "Oh, something about the investor pitch," Evan would say. "Just a client inside joke," Lena would add. But whenever I asked which client, neither of them could seem to remember. Still, I pushed down the unease, told myself I was overthinking, told myself that paranoia wasn't fair, not to them, not to the people I loved most. But the signs didn't stop, they multiplied. Lena started canceling our best friend nights, something we'd done for years. She'd always been the one begging me for downtime, insisting we needed it to stay sane. Now she'd message me hours before apologizing and saying she needed to stay late with Evan to sort out projections. Evan began doing the same thing with our date nights. Either he'd forget, or he'd come home claiming he and Lena needed to map out deadlines, redesign workflows, or troubleshoot an issue I'd never heard about. I'd ask questions, simple ones like, "What's going wrong with the budget?" or "What's the client issue?" and both of them would answer with vague half-sentences that never quite matched each other. The more I asked, the more defensive they became. And sometimes they didn't seem defensive. They seemed guilty. But nothing prepared me for the shift in how they acted around me. At meetings, Evan was always on his phone, always distracted. Lena, who used to be the emotional glue that kept our team functioning, now seemed laser-focused on Evan. They'd lean in close, whispering or laughing quietly about something I didn't understand. When I'd walk past, they'd pull apart like the moment hadn't happened. I kept telling myself it was stress, workload, burnout. But then there were the weekends. When the startup was young, weekends belonged to us, me and Evan. We'd cook together, watch movies, work on passion projects, wander into coffee shops to brainstorm. But suddenly Evan was too busy. He and Lena would need to finalize details, or prep for the launch, or get ahead of next quarter. Every time I asked if I could help, they'd wave me off. "It's fine, Helena, it's routine stuff. You can just rest. You work too hard." But they weren't working too hard. They were working without me. One Saturday night, I decided to bring them dinner from their favorite restaurant, a small gesture, an attempt to reconnect. I hadn't seen Evan face to face in 2 days. I thought maybe this would remind them that I cared, that I was part of this trio. I walked into the office expecting to see spreadsheets and whiteboards covered in notes. What I found was a silence so thick it felt staged. Evan and Lena were sitting close together, too close, over the same laptop. Their shoulders touched their heads, bent toward the screen. When they saw me, they jerked apart so quickly the chair squeaked. "Oh," Lena said, slamming the laptop shut. "We weren't expecting you." Evan cleared his throat. "Yeah, I thought you were working from home today." "I brought dinner," I said, trying not to let my voice shake. "Didn't want you two running on empty." They thanked me, but their reaction was wrong. They looked caught, startled, like teenagers doing something they shouldn't. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to smile, to pretend everything was fine. Later that night, after Evan finally came home, he smelled like Lena's perfume. When I mentioned it, he brushed it off. "Oh, she sprayed something in the office. You know how she is." I didn't argue. I didn't want to start a fight. I just wanted the gnawing feeling inside me to be wrong. But that hope didn't survive long. A few days later, I was cleaning the living room while Evan showered. He'd left his bag on the couch, half unzipped. I wasn't snooping, at least not intentionally. A small wrapped box was sticking out from under the cushion where he'd been sitting earlier. It wasn't a holiday. It wasn't his birthday. And Evan wasn't the type to hide gifts not from me anyway. Curiosity pushed me to pick it up. It was beautifully wrapped in navy blue paper with a silver ribbon. I thought for one foolish moment maybe it was for me. Maybe Evan was trying to surprise me. Then I turned the box over. There was a note. I recognized the handwriting instantly clean. Slightly slanted letters, the distinctive tail on the L. Lena's handwriting. The note said, "Can't wait to see you wear this." My heart slammed into my ribs. Hands shaking, I peeled back just a corner of the wrapping. Inside was a silver tie clip, simple, elegant, exactly Evan's style. Exactly the type of thing Lena had always loved picking out for people. I felt my throat close. My hands went cold. Every part of me screamed that I needed to confront him, to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. I shoved the gift back under the cushion the second I heard the shower turn off. I sat on the couch, frozen, terrified of the truth, and terrified of myself for still wanting to believe it was all in my head. That night, as Evan sat beside me watching some show I couldn't focus on, I turned to him and asked softly, "Evan, is everything okay with us?" He didn't even look away from the screen at first. Yeah, why wouldn't it be? But when he finally glanced at me, his eyes didn't match his words. They were distant, hollow, hiding something. And in that moment, really felt it for the first time. Something between us had broken. I just didn't know how deep the crack went. Not yet. The day everything shattered didn't come with a warning. There was no dramatic buildup, no thunder, no argument that spiraled out of control. It started like any other morning quiet routine, painfully ordinary. I think that's what I hate most about it. How normal it felt right before my entire world collapsed. I woke up early, still exhausted from another night of restless sleep. Evan had already left the apartment, leaving a rushed note on the counter. Went to the office early. Lots to prep. Lena hadn't sent me anything, but that wasn't unusual anymore. She'd been avoiding me in ways she probably thought were subtle. I didn't let myself dwell on it. I couldn't afford to, not that morning. Because I had a pitch. Not just any pitch, the pitch. A major investor meeting, the kind that could secure our future, take our company from surviving to scaling, from small time to something real. Normally, Evan would have gone with me. He was better with people, better at charming a room. And Lena would have been there with her perfect slide deck, smoothing over every transition like the presentation was choreography. But this time, Evan had shrugged it off. "You've got this, Helena. You don't need us for every pitch." Lena had chimed in without looking me in the eye. "Honestly, we have a backlog of internal stuff to finish. You're the one who understands the product best anyway." It was the first time they hadn't wanted to join me. I should have seen that as a sign, but I pushed it aside. I walked into the boardroom alone. My hands trembled as I set up my laptop, but once I started presenting, everything felt right. The investors were engaged, nodding, taking notes, asking smart questions. By the time I finished, several were already exchanging glances, the good kind. We got the funding, and I should have felt triumphant. I should have floated out of that building feeling unstoppable. Instead, all I could think about was how neither Evan nor Lena had texted me to ask how it went. By the time I reached the street, an idea had rooted itself in my chest, heavy, sickening, undeniable. I needed to go to the office, not later, not tomorrow, now. So I stopped at their favorite coffee shop and bought 3 lattes, one for each of us, and pastries we used to celebrate every win with. I imagined walking into the office, seeing their faces light up, hearing their excitement. Hell, maybe I needed that moment more than I realized. But when I stepped into the office, the air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels deliberate. "Evan," I called out. No answer. I told myself they were probably in the conference room, that it was fine, that I was still overthinking everything because of the stress. But when I reached the hallway, I froze. I heard voices. Lena's laugh. Soft, intimate. Not the laugh she used with clients, not the laugh she used with me. And then Evan's low voice, too warm, too familiar. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stepped closer. The coffee tray shook in my hands. Part of me begged myself to turn around to leave, to protect the last shred of ignorance I had left. But I kept walking. Something inside me needed the truth, even if it killed me. I took a breath, pushed the door open without knocking, and the world stopped. Evan and Lena were sitting close, so close their knees touched. Lena's hand rested on his arm like it belonged there. Evan leaned into her, their heads bent together over something on her laptop. But it wasn't the proximity that destroyed me. It was their faces when they looked up. Shock, guilt, fear. Like children caught breaking something they couldn't fix. Evan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Helena, hey, what are you doing here?" Lena snapped her laptop shut so fast the sound cracked through the room. "We weren't expecting you back so soon." "I wanted to bring you good news," I said, setting the pastries on the table with hands that weren't steady anymore. "We got the funding." Silence. They should have yelled in excitement, hugged me, celebrated. But instead they stared at me like I'd walked in on a funeral they weren't ready to explain. "What's going on?" I asked. No one answered. I took a step closer. "I'm serious. What is this?" Lena and Evan exchanged a glance, one of those quick, loaded ones I'd pretended not to see for weeks. Finally, Lena exhaled shakily. "Helena, this isn't how we wanted you to find out." The room spun, my heartbeat roared in my ears. Find out what I asked, though, every fiber of my being already knew. Evan rubbed the back of his neck, his voice trembling. We've been seeing each other." Just like that. 6 words. 6 words that detonated everything I thought I understood. Lena rushed in her words, tumbling over each other. "It wasn't planned. We didn't mean for it to happen. It just did." I stared at them numb. Did they expect me to comfort them, to understand, to make this easy? "Helena." Lena continued, her voice small. "I've been feeling disconnected. From us. And with Evan, it's different. We connect in ways I never have with anyone else." I felt something inside me twist violently. They weren't apologizing. They were explaining, justifying. Evan swallowed. "We didn't want to hurt you." I let out a hollow breath. "Then maybe you shouldn't have slept with each other." Neither said a word. My voice went cold. "So that's it. Months of lies, and all you have for me is it just happened." Lena looked down at her hands. "I'm sorry." Evan nodded weakly. "We're both sorry. There was so much I wanted to scream. So much I wanted to break. So much betrayal, grief, anger, humiliation boiling under my skin. But all I said was, 'Is that all?' Because in that moment, they didn't deserve my rage. They didn't deserve my tears. They didn't deserve another second of the life I'd given them." I walked out. I didn't look back. That night, I packed a bag and left the apartment. Checked into the cheapest hotel I could find. The next morning, I ended things with Evan, ended my friendship with Lena, and stepped away from the company I helped build. I didn't fight for anything. Not the apartment, not my shares, not my place in their story. I walked away because staying would have destroyed me. And because I had a plan, one they never saw coming. Starting over at 38 sounds dramatic, but it didn't feel dramatic at all. It felt numb, quiet, empty, in a way that scared me more than the betrayal ever had. Evan and Lena had taken the life I thought I was building, the future I thought I could trust, and crushed it without hesitation. But the strangest part, once I left, once I severed every tie, once I stepped into a tiny studio apartment in a rundown part of the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Air, real air, breathable air, air that belonged to me. My new place was awful cracked. Paint, paper-thin walls, hot water that worked only when the building felt generous. I had a mattress on the floor, a folding table I used as both a desk and a dining area, and a thrift store chair that groaned every time I sat on it. But it was mine. The first few weeks were brutal. I worked days at a local coffee shop just to afford groceries and rent. Nights I hunched over my old laptop coding for hours until my eyes burned. It was the only thing that made sense anymore. The only place I felt like myself. And without the weight of Evan's expectations or Lena's shadow, something in me snapped back into place like a bone that had been dislocated for years, finally realigned. Sometime around 2 a.m., one night, staring at my half-finished prototype, I remembered the idea Lena once called too risky. The idea, Evan said, wasn't worth the resources. The concept I had emailed to both of them 2 years ago, the one they dismissed as too niche. A seamless, intuitive mobile payment platform designed specifically for small businesses. I opened that old archived email chain. I stared at their rejection, and something rose in my chest, fierce, hungry, unstoppable. I began building it that night. The first year nearly broke me. I lived on instant noodles, day-old pastries the baristas set aside for me, and 2 hours of sleep a night. But I didn't care. For the first time in forever, I had direction, not a shared dream, not a team plan, not a joint vision. My dream, my plan, my vision. I kept the project quiet, terrified someone would try to take it from me again. But eventually, as the app started taking shape, I knew I needed help. I reached out to old acquaintances in the tech community. Small developers, under-the-radar engineers, tired dreamers, who wanted to believe again in something. Slowly, a tiny team formed around me. A team that believed in the idea. A team that believed in me. When we launched the beta, something incredible happened. People loved it. Small shops, restaurants, and freelancers adopted the platform. Word spread. Fast. Faster than anything I'd ever experienced. Within months, early investors reached out. Within a year, we had office space small but real. Not a garage, not a pity project, a company with momentum. And somewhere along the way, something shifted again. I stopped looking at Evan and Lena online, stopped checking what they were doing, stopped caring. Not out of anger, out of freedom. What they were doing, where they were going, who they were pretending to be, it didn't matter. Their chapter in my life was over. Their opinions, their choices, their betrayals, none of it could touch me anymore. Because I was building something better without them. While my company grew, theirs began to crumble. Whispers reached me through mutual acquaintances, investors doubting their leadership, product launches failing, employees leaving, Lena's marketing strategies flopping, Evan struggling with operations he never truly understood without me. Their perfect power couple facade was showing cracks. I didn't gloat, didn't smile, didn't wish them harm. My success didn't need their failure, but their failure. That was always going to happen without me. By year 3, my app was no longer a small-time innovation. It was becoming a serious player in the fintech space. Conference invitations poured in. Panels, articles, interviews. Words like visionary innovator and leader started appearing beside my name. Me, the girl who once hid in computer labs. The woman they walked over. The one they thought would break quietly. But success has a way of exposing old ghosts. And one day an email appeared in my inbox. From Evan Cole. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to decide whether to open it or delete it. Eventually, curiosity won. The email was long. Too long. The tone was desperate, apologetic in a frantic way. He said things had been rough for him. He mentioned that the startup he and Lena ran was sinking. Investors had pulled out. They were buried in debt. He implied things between him and Lena weren't going well, though he didn't spell it out. And then the real reason for the email, he wanted a job. At my company. He had seen an opening and thought his experience made him a perfect fit. The arrogance, the entitlement, the delusion. But before I could even process that email, another one arrived. From Lena. Hers wasn't confident. It was something else entirely, guilt mixed with nostalgia, flavored with regret. She talked about mistakes, about wanting to reconnect, about missing our friendship. She didn't directly ask for a job like Evan did, but she wanted something. Desperately. I read both emails twice, then again and again. Not because I was unsure, but because of how poetic it all felt. The two people who told me my ideas were small. The two people who destroyed everything I loved. The two people who built a future without me now needed the help of the woman they replaced. So I did what any professional would do. I forwarded their emails to HR with a simple instruction. Schedule them for interviews. Entry-level position. Junior support staff. Answering customer questions and troubleshooting. Minimal pay. Minimal prestige. A job far, far below any title they ever gave themselves. And I didn't warn them I'd be there. Some results are better served cold. Some revenge doesn't require vengeance. Sometimes the truth is enough. The morning of the interview felt strangely calm. No anxiety, no hesitation. Just a quiet, steady certainty pulsing through me. My assistant had arranged the conference room exactly as I requested, minimalistic, bright, clean. The kind of room where nothing hides. I sat at the head of the table reviewing a few notes I didn't actually need. This wasn't an interview in the traditional sense. It was a mirror. And it was time for them to see their reflection. When the door opened, I didn't look up immediately. I wanted to hear their footsteps, first hear how confidence turns to sand. "Good morning," I said. Then I lifted my eyes. Evan and Lena froze mid-step. Evan's mouth parted, but no sound came out. The usual easy charm he wore like a second skin was gone, replaced with panic burning under the surface. Lena looked smaller than I remembered her. Her posture curved inward, her eyes wide and glassy with embarrassment. I gestured to the seats across from me. "Please sit." They obeyed, because for once in their lives they didn't know what else to do. I folded my hands. "So, let's talk about the position." Evan tried to regain control first, clearing his throat and offering a forced smile. I wasn't expecting to see you here, Helena." Well, I said, keeping my voice smooth, "It is my company." I let that hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Lena stared at the table. Her fingers trembled slightly as she smoothed the edge of her portfolio. I began outlining the details of the entry-level role, customer support. Basic ticketing tasks, troubleshooting guides, the kind of work interns could perform. The salary wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't what someone used to calling themselves a founder would want. Evan blinked at me, stunned. "This seems a bit low level for my experience." Oh, I replied, widening my eyes just a fraction. Given the recent history of your company, this actually seems appropriate. His jaw tightened. Lena swallowed hard. Is there anything higher level available? Something closer to what we did before. I shook my head gently. Unfortunately, no, but this position could be a great opportunity to rebuild. They both flinched at that word. Rebuild. The exact thing I'd had to do alone. The exact thing they thought they'd never have to do. Evan shifted in his seat, desperation leaking into his expression. I just thought, given our past. I cut him off politely. This interview is about your qualifications. Nothing else. The rest of the interview played out like a slow-motion unraveling. They stumbled through questions they should have been able to answer in their sleep. Their confidence cracked. Their partnership fractured in real time, small glances, small disagreements, small hesitations. They weren't a team. Not anymore. When it ended, I stood, offered a brief handshake, and said, "Thank you for coming in. HR will be in touch." They didn't argue, didn't plead. Just left the room with the silence of people who finally understood the consequences of their choices. But the story didn't end there. That night, my inbox lit up with a new message from Evan. Not gratitude, not professionalism. A rant. He accused me of humiliating him, claimed I owed him for helping build my foundations, said the interview was a petty power move, said he regretted ever believing in me. And then came the boldest line. Your company is built on an idea I contributed to. I deserve compensation. I stared at the screen, almost laughing. It was delusion masquerading as entitlement. So I opened my archives. The old email chain from the early startup days. The one where I pitched the idea for the payment platform. The one he dismissed. His actual reply from years ago. Too niche, too risky, not worth resources. Perfect. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Because a week later, Evan tried something even more desperate. He sued me. He claimed intellectual ownership of my app concept, claimed he had shaped it, claimed he deserved a portion of my company. It would have been pathetic if it hadn't been so predictable. The court day arrived. Evan walked in with a stiff suit and false confidence. Lena wasn't with him. That told me more than any testimony could. My lawyer and I came armed with everything. Emails, timestamps, prototype logs, pitch notes, all of it in my name. The judge barely let Evan finish speaking before cutting him off. It didn't take an expert to see the truth. The ruling was in my favor, immediately, unanimously, decisively. When Evan realized how decisively he'd lost, he didn't look angry. He looked hollow, deflated, beaten by the very future he thought he'd stolen from me years ago. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the cold air hit my face like freedom. No triumph, no revenge high, just peace. Pure, steady, quiet peace. I realized something. Then I didn't win because Evan and Lena lost. I won because I let them go, rebuilt myself, and created something better than what they ever believed I could. Some betrayals break you, others build you. Mine did both. But I survived, and the woman I became, she was worth every scar.